What's up, squad? It's your squid, aka the anxious squid. These guys support the channel, give me money and whatnot. If you want to give me some of your money, you can too. The links are in the description, and yeah, I'll add your name to that graphic once you have. This video is on the top 10 worst NASCAR tracks. It's by Slapshoes. Slapshoes is an awesome content creator, so go and give them some love as well after you've watched it. Let's get straight into it. Thanks for your patience in between uploads, as always, guys, and thanks for clicking on the title or the thumbnail, whichever led you here. I'm going to jump straight into it, but yeah, top 10 worst NASCAR trucks. Seems pretty self-explanatory, I would have thought, but if you want to watch it without this video here, or, well, if you want to watch that video there without this face here and without all these reactions and stuff in the background and whatnot, the link's in the description. But yeah, let's get into it. Slapshoes, that's a cool logo.
The NASCAR Cup Series has held nearly 2,700 races across more than 170 different tracks since its inception in 1949. And of those 170 tracks to host a big league NASCAR event, they ranged all the way from ultra-modern, state-of-the-art cathedrals of speed to simple dirt ovals carved out into the countryside. But the true magic of NASCAR is that you don't have to dump millions into a facility for it to be a fan favorite. A little ingenuity and some good management can go a long way in making both drivers and fans alike happy as can be. But some tracks today live on in infamy, detested by drivers and viewers alike, and some even by the people who built and managed them.
Wow,
Maybe the tracks produced boring races, maybe they were a dump nobody wanted to go to, or possibly they were just so dangerous that drivers said to hell with racing there, or in a few cases,
that's interesting.
All of the above. So today let's take a look at what I think are the top 10 worst tracks to have ever appeared on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. To make this list, there are only two criteria. One, you have to have hosted at least one Cup race today, and two, the track has to have a fairly uniform history of being bad in some respect. I'll be looking at the track's overall history inside and outside of NASCAR. So a stretch of bad races recently will not override decades of good racing prior. So with all of that taken into consideration, let's get into it. Number 10, Talladega Superspeedway.
What?
Alright, let me explain. Okay, so Talladega today is a fan favorite with rabid turnout, drunken days-long parties taking place in the infield, and great close pack racing happening on a regular basis. But there are a lot of underlying issues that just barely put it on this list. When the track first saw the light of day in 1969, it was mired in controversy.
Yep. People were going over the walls and shit, weren't they?
Driver walkout, and only 3 competitive cars took to the track.
Oh, I remember that. We watched the whole video on it. Might have been Slapshoes as well. Like they brought cars that weren't even the right model car in to fucking race this race, right? Yeah, I remember that.
Second. Bobby Isaac, one of those competitive cars, dropped back early on. And then of those two that were left, a scoring error means that we're not even sure which one of them actually won the race, even to this day. Add that rocky start to a litany of driver injuries and fatalities, and now we're talking about a track that is almost too dangerous to run at. NASCAR legend Tiny Lund lost his life here, Wendell Scott suffered a career-ending injury, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. had a wreck in 2012 that gave him a bad concussion and eventually led to his early retirement at the end of the 2017 season. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, Bobby Isaac once pulled off the track in the middle of a race and got out of his car because he said he heard voices in his head that told him to stop or else. Later in that same race,
that's a bit creepy.
The winner from the previous year, Larry Smith, died in an accident. And let's not forget about Bobby Allison's 1987 crash in Colorado.
Oh, fuck, that's a catch fence and a half.
Now we have to talk about how this is one of the few tracks where fans actually risk life and limb just sitting in the stands. And we haven't even talked about the multi-car pileups that make car owners seethe with anger at the mere mention of this track's name. The big one is such a ubiquitous event associated with Talladega that nobody wonders if it's going to happen or even when. It's a matter of how many times it will happen throughout the day. Nowadays, races at Talladega are so marred by wrecks that they routinely go over their allotted runtime. And just this year, at the second Talladega race, the event got booted off of network TV and was sent to cable, and hundreds of thousands of people never even got to see the end of the race.
Yeah, I didn't.
I haven't even mentioned the yellow line rule yet. But hey, that's a topic for another video.
Well, maybe
it's a fun track, no doubt, but man,
maybe I only watched the end.
And a lot of modern kinks to
because of a rain delay.
How racing at Talladega will look as the years roll on.
I haven't watched much NASCAR this year, to be honest, and it's like it disappoints me because I've got the fucking calendar, like I've got it synced to my calendar, you know, the schedule, and so I get notifications whenever the tracks are on, whenever the Cup Series is on, like it'll tell me 20 minutes beforehand, hey, this thing's coming on, you should watch it. And I got so into NASCAR, you guys watched me get into NASCAR as like during the lockdowns and stuff for, you know, the virus that shall not be named, for monetization purposes and whatnot. this and cornhole like got me through that in terms of sport, because everything else was shut down. And every single weekend I'm like, yeah, I want to like, I'm keeping track of who's winning, I'm keeping track of what's happening. Like, I follow Bubba Wallace on Instagram and Twitter, and like, I think he's a really interesting dude. I follow a whole bunch of drivers on different social medias and stuff, but just through circumstance of either watching hockey and football, which, you know, they're probably the only two sports I rate above NASCAR in America, but it just so happens that they've been played at the same time, generally speaking, the last year or so when I've wanted to watch it. Or, like, I've just been doing parenting stuff or, like, family-related stuff. It's, you know, whenever anybody offers me an under-the-table sort of job, I have to go do it, because as an American immigrant who is not yet legally allowed to work, because of my pending green card application and all that sort of stuff, like, I can't knock back money, you know? Like, if people offer me a way of getting money, like, my wife's heavily pregnant, she can't work at the moment, we're pretty much our parents' dependents again, at the moment, other than the income that I get from YouTube and the Mad Dogs that I shouted out at the start and stuff, right? So, it's like, I'm disappointed in myself for not watching as much NASCAR, but I fucking, like, I don't know, like, it's I've never been this invigorated by a sport that I've just discovered, if that makes sense. Like, I feel it's disappointing that I haven't watched enough of it, and I can't remember why I just started that thing. Let's go back and
topic for another video. It's a fun track, no doubt, but man, does
Talladega, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's probably the only race that I've watched this year. I watched the start, then there was a rain delay or something. Something happened. I didn't watch for ages because I was doing something else, and then I flicked it back on right near the end, sort of thing, you know. And it was cool, but I think it was either last weekend or the weekend before they did the throwback paint schemes, and Bubba Wallace was in a, had a paint scheme similar to the first black guy that had ever won a race, and then they'd taken that race off, and we've done a video of it back then and stuff as well. But yeah, let me know what race this year I should check out the highlights from first, because I want to react to the radioactives and the highlights and stuff like that this season, because I know the drivers and I've got more of my head wrapped around the sport, like, in this season, if that makes sense. So tell me, if you've watched all the races, which ones I should check out the highlights for first, if that makes sense. What do you reckon will get the most views? But anyway.
And a lot of modern kinks to hammer out. How racing at Talladega will look as the years roll on is yet to be seen, but whatever happens, it will remain a fan favorite for a long time, no matter how badly it hurts the wallets of every team in the sport. Number 9, Kentucky Speedway.
Kentucky?
Only a phenomenal final race in 2020 saved this track from being higher on the list. But with years of boring cookie-cutter races under its belt, it's safe to say that Kentucky left a lot to be desired. The 1.5-mile track with 14 degrees of banking was a product of its time. Part of an expansionist phase with
Speaking
NASCAR.
of Kentucky as well, has nothing to do with NASCAR, but I watched a whole video the other day of some, like, Daily Show comedian or something going around and asking Americans if they knew where Kentucky Fried Chicken was from, and so many people were like, I don't know, like, somewhere down south, I don't know, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, I don't know where that's from. Obviously fucking Kentucky. Right, like...
But big venues and big markets, but it just never took off. When it was brought onto the schedule in 2011, hopes were high for this track. It had originally been built in 2000, and with the 11-year-old surface and ultra-wide track, many thought the racing would be phenomenal, as it had been in the Busch and ARCA series from the previous decade. But the track just produced snooze fests. On top of that, its first race in 2011 was plagued with infrastructure issues.
Mum and pop pizza shop just down the road from here called Frenchie's that does the best fucking chicken wings, the best boneless chicken, and the best pizza, just throwing that out there. Yeah, I don't know who out of the big chains, who I think the best chicken is in America, but Frenchie's is definitely the best chicken in Niagara Falls.
And a massive traffic jam on opening day meant that thousands couldn't even make it to the track for the
That's rough.
Later they fixed these issues, but in 2015 another problem popped up. Drainage problems were compounded by weepers in the turns that held water and slowly expelled it onto the track over the course of hours. So even when the rain stopped, the track would take hours upon hours to fully dry.
That's unfortunate.
They repaved it for the 2016 season with higher banks in turns 1 and 2. But 3 and 4 were left at their normal 14 degrees, and the width of the track was also reduced from 72 feet to 56 feet, so that its one saving grace of a wide track surface was taken away.
Yeah,
despite being near the promising markets close to Louisville and Cincinnati, in 2020 it was announced that it would be dropped from the schedule for the 2021 season.
I hear that's actually Louisville, not Louisville. I hear that's mispronounced, like lots of people say Louisville, but that the people in Louisville say Louisville, not Louisville. Let me know if that's incorrect or not. Just, you know, it's Kirsten Dunst's character out of a movie with Orlando Bloom that has the same plot as Garden State, but I can't remember the title of the actual movie with Orlando Bloom. It's like Orlando Bloom is this big hotshot somewhere, has to come back to his like little town where his mum's died, and like they bond and stuff. He's a hotshot and he's fucked up, but people don't know he's fucked up. It's the exact same story as Garden State, where except Zach Braff is the main character in Garden State and Natalie Portman is the love interest. And you know, that was a low budget indie sort of film. Zach Braff being the main guy in Scrubs, JD or whatever. If you don't know who he is, if I remember during editing, I'll put a picture up of him there. But yeah, he wrote and directed and starred in a movie called Garden State. It's a phenomenal movie. About 12 months after it had landed, production started for this other movie, who I can't remember the title of, but I remember I dislike it because it's Orlando Bloom and Kirsten Dunst in pretty much the exact same fucking movie. Anyway, I can't remember why I was talking about that. Kirsten Dunst, that's right, Kirsten Dunst saying Louisville instead of Louisville. Let me know if she was right.
Its passing. Instead, it was met with a firm good riddance. Number 8, Raleigh Speedway. Today, we race fans get peeved at people who decide to build
Elizabethtown. That's the shitty movie. Garden State, good. Elizabethtown, bad.
Homes next to active racetracks and then complain that there's too much noise. Myrtle Beach was torn down in part because of such complaints. Nashville has to deal with strict curfews.
Fucking fancy moving next to a racetrack and then bitching about the noise.
Racetracks and then complain that there's
fuck
too
off,
much
you
noise.
Square cunt. Fuck.
Good riddance. Number 8, Raleigh Speedway. Today, we race fans get peeved at people who decide to build their homes next to active racetracks and then complain that there's too much noise. Myrtle Beach was torn down in part because of such complaints. Nashville has to deal with strict curfews and noise ordinances to this very day, and Laguna Seca can only hold races on certain pre-approved weekends. This is, of course, absurd. If you don't like the noise, perhaps you shouldn't have built your house next to a racetrack. I mean, what did you think went on there? But what about the opposite happening? What if you built your house far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, only to have a 1-mile super speedway built on your backyard?
Yeah, that'd be a bit of a dick move.
In Raleigh, North Carolina. Built in 1952, Raleigh Speedway.
I mean, it's North Carolina, though, to be fair. Like, if you live in NC, you probably shouldn't give a shit about a sport. You know what I mean? Like, it's... I have a hoodie just over there, I'm looking at it, that is in Carolina blue. That was the drop-down option. It's not baby blue, it's not pastel blue, it's Carolina blue, because of how fucking sport mad that fucking place is. And, well, I think it's also because of the university, North Carolina something or other, the one MJ played for. But anyway, like, out of everywhere in the world, North Carolina, I'm sure, would be the most chill with a fucking NASCAR track being built in their backyard, but still a bit of a dick move.
Paved super speedways, being 1 mile in length with 16-degree banks. It offered up some of the biggest prize pools in NASCAR at that time, and IndyCar races were also popular at the venue. They even installed stadium lights at the track and would usually race the Cup Series on the night of July 4th. But that only exacerbated the problem with the locals, who had to deal with the noise all throughout the year from modified races and weekly racing on the quarter-mile infield track. In 1953, the track had 2 fatalities in one night.
Oh, that's
when Bill
unfortunate.
Blevins stalled on the backstretch coming to take the green flag. The track's lighting was dim and Bill's burgundy car was hard to see from their press box nearly half a mile away. So NASCAR started the race thinking nothing was wrong. But then as the cars came around, everybody scrambled to miss Blevins, except Jesse Midkiff, who hit him head on, and both drivers died instantly. That event thereafter was referred to as Black Saturday, and it gave the track a dangerous reputation. And with complaints against this...
Black Saturday is a thing in Australia as well, relates to fucking bushfires that occurred at some point.
Speedway
I'll do a video on it for my history playlist.
Motor Bill France had an open slot for Daytona for the July 4th weekend of 1959. He canceled the race at Raleigh and moved the date to Daytona, where it remained until just this year. The track was abandoned shortly thereafter and the land was repurposed over the years. However, a portion of the backstretch still remains in the woods next to a Duke Energy substation.
Wow.
And as fate would have it, the portion remaining is the site of Blevins and Midkiff's fatal accident. Number 7.
Ooh,
Islip
that's creepy.
Speedway. One of just a few tracks ever built on Long Island, New York, Islip Speedway is credited with hosting the first Demolition Derby and Figure 8 races.
Oh, wow, Figure 8.
The novel idea from track owner Larry Mendelson drew in tons of fans, and they ended up sticking around for the real racing, quote-unquote, that went on too. It was a massive draw for modifieds, but the Cup Series also came by from 1964 until 1971, and the races were big hits with the fans. So, what's the problem? The track was just way too small. It holds the distinction of being the smallest track to ever host a cup race at just 1/5 of a mile long.
1/5 of a mile, fuck.
Stadium. And the Cup Series was bringing 25 to 33 cars per race.
Yeah, wow.
It was so bad that guys in the back of the pack would know when to take the green flag because they could see the leaders taking it in their rear view mirrors.
Shit.
Also, due to its small size, it was incredibly hard to pass. During its entire run in the Cup Series across 6 races, there were a combined 12 lead changes.
Okay.
That's it. Plus, we take into consideration that it was halfway up Long Island, and the logistical nightmare that must have been driving through New York City just to get there when there's another race just a few days later in May. Yeah, there was no way Islip was going to work out long term. It lived on as a draw for the modifieds until the 1980s when it was torn down to build a cookie factory of all things. Number 6, Columbia Speedway. Hosting one of the last dirt races ever in the Cup Series in 1970, Columbia Speedway in Casey, South Carolina was a massive draw for the Cup Series and weekly racing series for decades. Its hard-packed dirt surface produced fast racing and intense side-by-side action that was so good that the Cup Series routinely came here 2 or sometimes even 3 times per year. And as such, the list of winners here reads like a list of Hall of Famers. Fans loved the track and turned out in droves to watch the races of all kinds out here. And it even had lights for night racing during hot summer months. That's handy. So what's the problem? The track had some serious design flaws in its construction. To put it bluntly, it was just really, really outdated. The walls and the turns were just thick wooden planking held in place with telephone poles.
That's not good.
One time David Pearson careened through the wall in turn 1 and ended up in a little creek in the woods. Plus, the front stretch wall was literally just 3 rows of railroad rails hoisted up by more rails set into the ground in 3 feet of concrete, meaning that if a car hit it, it would almost certainly be torn apart and a rail blanket lodged inside the car and impale a driver. While that never happened in the Cup Series, there was an instance of a motorcycle racer who fell off of his bike and hit the railing at high speed and died instantly. Many local late model racers and NASCAR guys flat out refused to race here, citing safety concerns. When the track was paved in 1971, the faster speeds made even more drivers anxious about racing here. Add that to the tiny pit road and you have a track that was never going to survive the modernization efforts of 1972. And Columbia was abandoned shortly thereafter. In 2010, the land was reclaimed and the track lives on today as a venue for concerts, car shows, and other outdoor events.
That's cool.
Number 5, Texas Motor Speedway. Okay, so
might have to head there at some point.
Why this track ended up being so high on the list is a long one, but here's the Cliff Notes version.
Speaking of which, actually,
built as a state-of-the-art track that would host NASCAR.
Nearly at the point where I'm going to have a vehicle. Like, I've got my license finally, because I live in a cool state, in short. Most states in the country wouldn't allow an immigrant with a pending green card application to have his license, his driver's license, until the application was done and sorted. But because I live in New York State, and they even allow fucking illegal immigrants to have driver's licenses and stuff, which is a whole nother discussion to have. You know, I've got lots of thoughts about immigration and illegal immigrants versus legal immigrants and stuff. Like, I've been waiting fucking 2.5 years. Nothing, you know? Like, I should have just fucking, instead of flying here and doing it all legally, I should have fucking crossed the border down south and I'd have more stuff, you know? I'd have more things open to me. But again, it's not a very compassionate way of looking at it. I'm not fleeing for my life, so it's different, you know what I mean? But sometimes I do get bitter. Nonetheless, I have my driver's license now. We're saving to get a car. We're hoping for a Grand Caravan or a Santa Fe or something big, because we've got a 10-month-old baby, or 11 months actually. He'll be a year on the 8th of June, and we've got a baby coming probably before then as well, or just after. We'll see. The due date was the same day, a year apart. You know, we've got 3 kids in short, so we need a big car. I want to go out camping and stuff. If you've seen the channel Camping with Steve, or Steve Wallace, sorry, I want to do videos like that, like stealth camping and all that sort of stuff. Maybe take my 7-year-old with me and stuff and do cool content with her and whatnot. And yeah, I'm very, very close to getting a car. So we're paying all our bills with YouTube income and help from parents and stuff. But if you want to help me get a car quicker and you want to see camping content, you want me to go to these cool tracks and do vlogs at a fucking NASCAR event and cool stuff like that, the quickest I can get to that, it just, you know, the quickest way I get to that is if you give me some of your money and I can get a car. So I am unashamedly, at this point, reminding you there is a link in the description to join my Patreon, a link in the description to send me money via PayPal. Like, I'm like 2 or 3 grand away from the car and dream content making and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, do me a solid and help me out. The American government is making it as hard as they possibly can for me, but the American people surprise me every day with their generosity, so we'll see how we go. But, or don't, you know, just keep watching my content. I get paid something like $6 every 1,000 ads that get seen, and I fucking stack the ads on these videos, so if you're not in a position that you can help me financially and stuff, just fucking watch my content, you know? Watch a whole bunch of it. Put the videos on in the background with no volume on when you're doing other shit. You know what I mean? Like, every single thing that you guys do, if you're seeing me say this, you're already helping me. Don't feel bad for not, you know, financially doing other stuff. I just, you know, I read a word the other day, mendicant, which is an old-timey Old English word for basically a professional beggar, somebody who begs for a living. And I feel a bit like a mendicant at the moment, but I'm also a YouTuber, so you can just support me YouTuberly without giving me all these extra fucking monies with Patreon and Milkman and all that sort of jazz. Don't feel like you have to, you know what I mean?
Pro Speedway and left it to rot in North Carolina just so we could have a for concerts, car shows, and other outdoor events. Number 5.
I want to go to that
Speedway. Okay, so
that
the
would be
litany
cool.
of reasons why this track ended up being so high on the list is a long one, but here's the Cliff Notes version. Originally built as a state-of-the-art track that would host NASCAR and IndyCar races, track owner Bruton Smith bought out North Wilkesboro Speedway and left it to rot in North Carolina just so he could have a guaranteed race date.
That's rough. I'm going to buy that one so they can't have it anymore and give you this one instead. Alright.
Then in testing, a month before its first race in 1997, it was found out that pit lane was too narrow and the transitions out of the corners were horrible. So they made a bunch of last-minute fixes to the track, and there was a massive pile-up on the first lap of the race anyway. They spent millions to reconfigure the track. There was another wreckfest of a race in 1998, and they spent another $2 million reconfiguring it again. And after all that, the track only produced mediocre racing. The infrastructure and amenities at the track were top-notch, but dwindling crowds have many NASCAR fans wondering if the Dallas-Fort Worth area is a market worth staying at. Stands that used to sit over 150,000 people are now lucky to get a third as many people to show up on race day. And another reconfiguring in 2017 where banking in turns 1 and 2 was reduced made racing even more lackluster. The track used to have some marquee events on the NASCAR and IndyCar schedules, but with Chicago and Kentucky both being dropped for 2021 out of the blue, many wonder if Texas will receive the same fate as the years roll on.
Maybe.
Number 4, Tulsa Fairground Speedway. A mainstay in the early IndyCar days, Tulsa was set up to be a foray into the Western market for NASCAR in 1956. One day prior, a race at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds in Oklahoma City was held, but only about 12 cars showed up for that race, and Jim Hassel ended up with the W after it was all said and done. The next day, the same guys headed over to Tulsa for a 200-lap event at the half-mile dirt oval at the fairgrounds. But it was in the middle of a drought in early August, and the track had not been kept up or prepared for a race. And with no water being put on the track, it created tons of dust.
Slippery.
The dust was so bad that announcers couldn't even see who was where on the track.
Oh, that's
drivers
rough.
said they couldn't even see 3 feet in front of them. Fans were
That's a recipe for disaster.
And running out of the grandstands to catch their breath. And after 32 laps, Lee Petty, who was running second, pulled into the pits, walked across the track while the race was still going on, kicked open the crossover gate, climbed up to the flag stand, and took the red flag for himself to wave the race off.
Wow.
Initially on lap 34, the race was halted and never resumed. No prize money or points were awarded, and everybody packed up and left and acted as though the race had never even happened in the first place. NASCAR never came back to the state of Oklahoma ever again. Yeah, one horrible race ended NASCAR's plans for westward expansion. They'd stay mostly southeastern for decades to come. Tulsa lived on hosting dirt races for years afterwards, though, in other series. But in 2009, it was closed down and demolished.
That's the exact I've spoken about before, right? That car there. Fucking rewind, you piece of shit. This car here is the type of car that my stepdad's old man was an Australian champion in. He in the 60s and 70s, he raced those at tracks all around the country, and yeah, was a national champion on more than one occasion, I believe. But no, actually, I'm confused. This is the type of car that I always think he drove, but he drove the sedans that also raced at the events that these raced at. My old man corrected me last time we spoke about it. He drove sedans, but he drove, like, the racing company that he drove for was a predominantly this type of car racing company, if that makes sense, and he raced on dirt. Anyway, his name's Gary Schroeder. He's cool. I liked him. I like him. He's still alive. He's a good bloke. He's a nice guy, and he's my, I don't know what you would call it, step-grandfather? Grandfather? Like, through my stepdad? Like, he's my old man's old man, you know? But I I had never been into motorsport growing up, and then during the lockdown, I got super into motorsport, and my old man was like, oh yeah, you know, my old man was, you know, pretty fucking good at motorsport, right? And I was like, what? And he sent me a couple of books, and I was like, holy fucking shit, that's your old man in a photo, with a car and stuff, in a book. And he's like, yeah, he won a couple of championships. Anyway, I'm going to keep watching this.
Dirt races for years afterwards, though, in other series, but in 2009 it was closed down and demolished 1 year later. Number 3, Air Base Speedway. Longtime viewers will immediately know why this track made the list, but for those of you just hearing about this track for the first time, let me give you the rundown. Originally called Greenville Textile Speedway, this track was built by Charlie Hicks in Greenville, South Carolina in 1949. Okay. It hosted tons of local races with late models, modifieds, motorcycles, and more. It even had lights and held night races, a rarity for the time. In 1950, the track changed its name to Air Base Speedway, in honor of the Donaldson Air Force Base just north of the track. Later that year, one race had to be called off in the middle of the main event for bad track conditions. And despite being billed as the fastest track in the Southeast, qualifying times were horrendously slow. As it turned out, Charlie Hicks really didn't have any clue what he was doing.
That's
the track also had no permanent amenities to speak of, and was just a kind of slapdash ramshackle.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Hell, the track utilized wooden walls all the way up until its dying day. Despite bad track conditions, slow speeds, and virtually nothing in the way of luxuries for fans, Charlie Hicks did manage to weasel his way onto the 1951 Cup Series schedule with an August 25th race date. The race went off without any issues, and Bob Flock won. But when Buck Baker tried to lease the track at the end of the year, he ran into a problem. Hicks had tried to procure a loan for the track, but never disclosed that the facility had a lien on it from the bank. That netted him a fraud charge and a whopping fine of $19,000 in today's money.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Eventually put him under. It was sold and left to rot over the course of decades. It's now the site of an industrial park, but if you know where to look, you can still find a section of the backstretch today tucked away in the woods.
That's mad.
Texas World Speedway. Located in College Station, Texas, Texas World was supposed to be the next leap forward in tracks made for NASCAR. It was built as a one-for-one copy of Michigan International with a 2-mile D-shaped configuration. But Texas's banks were 4 degrees steeper for a total of 22 degrees.
Wow, that's fucking...
It held its first races in 1969 and would host NASCAR and IndyCar races just 1 year later. But in the first few years, something was amiss. The track was fast, there were plenty of lead changes, and drivers seemed to like the track itself, but the amenities left a lot to be desired. Building a 2-mile superspeedway ain't cheap, and the original builders had cut corners where they could. Rumors about bathrooms not working or overflowing persisted, and even by the standards of the time, everything except the product on the track was lagging sorely behind expectations.
That's unfortunate.
Fewer and fewer folks kept coming out to the races, and by the mid-70s, the track was taken off the schedule and changed hands and ownership a few times. One owner even went bankrupt trying to keep the place going. It came back from 1979 through 1981, but by then it was clear that the new owners were just barely scraping by, and the track was falling apart at the seams. Not to mention people still would not show up to the races.
Yeah, well, you're going to be able to take a shit somewhere.
The series never came back, but Texas World would go on to be bought out by a Japanese company who gave it a much-needed repave in the 1990s, and it hosted some Busch East and ARCA races until they too left. And the only sanctioning body left at the track was the Sports Car Club of America, who utilized the 3-mile infield road course all the way up until the track's dying day in 2017.
Oh wow, that's not that long ago.
The track is in the slow and steady process of being demolished, but with the economy grinding to a halt, so has its destruction. So it still remains standing for now.
That's kind of cool.
A multi-billion-dollar track with big ambitions falling apart from day one, and a rotating door of owners who could never make it work, meant that fans never wanted to turn out to the Speedway, and off into the history books it went. Man, between it and Texas Motor Speedway and COTA and possible financial trouble, you might start wondering why we're even in the Texas market in the first place. It honestly seems like they just don't like auto racing down there, but that's a video for another time. Number 1, Langhorne Speedway. Widely considered by many at the time to be the most dangerous track in the U.S., Langhorne Speedway in Langhorne, Pennsylvania was a 1-mile, almost...
It looked like a fucking Star Trek logo that guy was carrying.
Number 1, Langhorne Speedway. Widely considered by many at the time to be the most dangerous track in the U.S., Langhorne Speedway in Langhorne,
that straight up looks like a fucking Star Trek logo.
Perfectly circular.
I think it's the hood of a car.
Since the whole track was basically one gigantic left-hand turn, that meant that drivers were constantly in the throttle, and any mechanical failure or crash would result in a pile-up into the outside wall, which was just a thin strip of guardrail. No less than 18 drivers died at the track, and many more were injured over the years. Bobby Unser said of the track, "That was the most dangerous track on Earth. I can't imagine another track being that dangerous."
Jesus
Most NASCAR and
Christ.
IndyCar drivers feared racing there, but that didn't stop it from being a hit with the fans. They were
There's no catch fence either. Look how fucking close they
at a
are.
time when most tracks couldn't even get half that.
Oh, that's a lot of
Being so close to
fire.
The big market of Philadelphia didn't hurt either. While NASCAR stopped coming here in the late 50s, IndyCar pressed on. But in the 70s, when the track was paved and speeds became even faster, the danger was just too much and drivers boycotted the race.
Yeah, I bet.
Langhorne was sold and demolished not too long afterwards. It was a founding track in NASCAR with a lot of history, but unfortunately, its configuration and lack of safety features sealed its fate.
Makes
anyway, I'm
sense.
Slapshoes. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
Thanks, Slapshoes. You're a good dude. As always, check out Slapshoes' content. As always, check out Slapshoes' content. That was lucky. The battery just died on my camera just as I finished recording the reaction. So thanks for that. If every single one of my subscribers became a $1 patron today, tomorrow I could buy the car I was talking about in this video. So yeah, big shout out goes to these guys. If you want to get your name in that list, even with just $1, check out Patreon and help me out financially. That would be sick. Failing all of that though, don't even bother with it. Just watch a whole bunch of my content. That would be sick as well. And yeah, I'll see you guys when I look at you. You'll see me when you look at me. I'm going to charge the fucking camera so that that doesn't happen again. And I'll see you when I look at you. You'll see me when you look at me. Thanks for watching.